Welcome to episode 16 of the Ulysses Unlocked podcast, where we analyze Ulysses by James Joyce one page at a time. We have finished the Telemachus episode, and we are now moving on to the Nestor episode. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us. So we're making a transition now in this deep dive, moving out of that initial sequence of Ulysses. We're leaving the tower, leaving Buck Mulligan mostly behind, thankfully.
Yeah, it's a definite shift. We're going from chapter 1, Telemachus, straight into chapter 2. Nestor.
And it feels quite abrupt, doesn't it? We're suddenly not with Stephen in his early morning thoughts at the Martello Tower. He's at work.
Exactly. Plopped right into his professional life, teaching in a classroom. It immediately signals a change, not just in setting, but in the intellectual focus, too.
Right. Because Joyce structured these chapters, didn't he? The first was linked to theology.
And this one, Nestor Joyce, connects it to the art of history. So we find Stephen, the sort of struggling intellectual, teaching at Mr. Deasy's school for boys.
Caught right in the middle of giving a lesson. But, as always with Joyce, what's happening on the surface? Well, it's just a springboard, isn't it?
Absolutely. The classroom, the lesson, it's all really a backdrop for this intense internal drama playing out in Stephen's head about the past, about history.
Okay, so that's really our mission for this deep dive then. We need to unpack this chapter, try to get at the meaning behind how Stephen interacts, or maybe fails to interact, with his students.
And more than that, dig into his internal struggle. This idea he has that history is a kind of nightmare he's trying to wake up from. Why does it feel like that to him?
Why does the past seem like such a burden, and how is he trying maybe to think his way out of it, out of its grip?
And it's so important for you, the listener, to see why this isn't just some abstract literary puzzle. Stephen is dealing with huge, universal questions.
Like the weight of past failures, whether we actually have free will or if everything's fated.
And crucially, the very specific situation of Ireland in 1904. Colonial Ireland. The history he's teaching isn't neutral. You have to see it as part of a system.
A system designed to keep things as they are, basically.
Right. So understanding how Stephen reacts to this lesson, his internal resistance, that's where we find the artist, the potential revolutionary, stuck inside this oppressive structure.
Okay, let's jump right into that classroom then. The text shows Stephen quizzing his students about some old battle. What are the details he's after?
Well, he starts off pretty conventionally, pedagogically speaking. He asks which city called for aid in this conflict.
And one student, Cochrane, gets it right.
Yeah, Cochrane says Tarentum. So they establish that, but then the student kind of stumbles on the actual location of the battle.
And Stephen has to look it up himself. That's interesting.
It is. A small detail, but telling. He glances at his book, his gore-scarred book, Joyce calls it, to find the name. Asculum, 279 BC.
That moment where he checks the book, it kind of chips away at his authority in the room, doesn't it? Maybe suggests his real interest isn't the dates and places.
Exactly. His mind's already leaping ahead, you feel.
Yeah.
He's not just focused on the empirical facts, but the philosophy, the meaning behind the facts.
But the student, Cochrane, he does manage to pull out the key phrase from this battle.
Yes, he delivers the line that's echoed down through history. Another victory like that, and we are done for.
The famous Pyrrhic victory. Okay, let's talk about Pyrrhus of Epirus for a second, because he seems really symbolic here.
Hugely symbolic.
Yeah.
He was this Greek general, a brilliant tactician, actually, who went to help the Greek colony of Tarentum against Rome, which was, the rising power.
He won battles, didn't he? Heraclea, Asculum.
He did, but they were incredibly costly victories, especially Asculum. He lost so many men, so many resources, that winning was almost the same as losing. That phrase captures it perfectly.
Winning yourself into oblivion.
Pretty much. And the bigger picture is, well, what does it say about resisting a massive expanding empire like Rome? Pyrrhus's campaign ultimately showed it was futile. He gave up, left Italy, and Tarentum eventually fell to Rome anyway.
Now let's overlay that onto Dublin, 1904. Stephen's teaching the specific lesson in Mr. Deasy's school, which is very pro-British, very establishment.
Yes, and the implication is strong, isn't it? The sources really suggest this curriculum is being used, consciously or not, as a tool of colonial sort of management.
Indoctrination, almost.
It's hard not to see it that way. The lesson subtly tells these Anglo-Irish boys, look, resistance against the big empire, whether it's Rome then or Britain now, it's just a lost cause. And that's a phrase used later in the book.
So it teaches futility. It conditions them towards accepting the status quo, accepting British rule.
Exactly. It reinforces the idea that struggle is just too costly, it leads to ruin, so better just to submit. History becomes a weapon here, stripped of its nuance and just used to teach failure.
Okay, so Stephen then turns his attention to another boy, Armstrong. He asks him about how Pyrrhus died.
And this is where Joyce gives us those brilliant little social markers, those economic tells.
Right, the figural.
The figural.
Hmm.
Armstrong has them snugly in his satchel. Immediately, these are well-off people. They live on Vico Road in Dalkey, which is a prosperous area.
And his older brother is heading for the Navy, a career path straight into the Empire's service.
Meanwhile, Stephen himself is barely scraping by, needing this job. He's the educated but poor Irishman teaching the sons of the colonial elite. The power dynamic is stark.
Let's pause on that address. Vico Road, Dalkey. Obviously it tells us Armstrong's family has money, prime real estate near Dublin, but Joyce chose that name very specifically, didn't he, in a chapter about history?
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive nod to Giambattista Vico, the 18th century Italian philosopher of history. You just can't ignore that connection.
And Vico's ideas are fundamental to understanding Stephen's whole nightmare of history thing.
It's totally fundamental. Vico's big idea in his work, The New Science, wasn't that history is a straight line of progress. He saw it as cyclical.
The corsi and ricorsi, cycles of rise and fall.
Exactly. Civilizations go through stages, divine, heroic, human, then they decline, decay, fall back into a kind of barbarism, and then the whole cycle, the ding-dong round, as Joyce puts it, starts all over again.
So if Vico is right, we're just doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. Oppression, resistance, decay, repeat.
That's the implication. And for Stephen, who wants art, vision, change, escape, Vico's cycle is utterly suffocating. It suggests there's no real escape, no waking up. The colonial situation is just another turn of the wheel.
So Vico Road, the address of the privileged student, becomes a symbol of this philosophical trap Stephen feels caught in.
Wow.
It's layers upon layers. The location literally embodies the historical theory that makes Stephen despair.
Okay, so back in the classroom, there's this moment where Armstrong misunderstands Stephen. He hears Pyrrhus as peer. And Stephen, quick as a flash, tries to turn into a clever remark. He calls Kingstown Pier a disappointed bridge.
Trying to inject some wit, some of his linguistic skill into the dull lesson.
Yes, asserting his intellect, his artistry. But it falls completely flat. The boys just laugh.
And Joyce describes their laughter very precisely. Mirthless, high malicious laughter. Why those words?
It's so cutting. It's not mirthful because they don't appreciate the wit itself. It's malicious because their laughter comes from understanding the power dynamic.
They know he has no real control.
They know he has lack of rule, as the text says. They know their fathers pay the fees. Their laughter confirms his powerlessness, his social and economic vulnerability, despite his obvious intelligence. It's cruel.
Stephen also notices some boys whispering in the back, boys who knew, had never learned, nor ever been innocent. What's that about?
It suggests they possess a different kind of knowledge, something worldly, maybe cynical, perhaps even sexual, that Stephen, in his intellectual isolation and moral seriousness, lacks. They're already initiated into aspects of life he seems removed from.
He sees the girls, too, their bracelets tittering, their breath smelling of tea and jam. It paints a picture of comfortable youth.
Comfortable, privileged, maybe a bit complacent youth, contrasted sharply with Stephen, the starving artist, literally and figuratively serving this class he fundamentally opposes. And this failed joke, this hostile reception, it just sends his mind spinning outwards again.
If reality is this disappointing, he needs another framework.
Exactly. And he reaches for William Blake.
How does he connect a failed Greek general and a misheard word to Blake's radical ideas about vision?
Well, his mind jumps straight to history being fabled by the daughters of memory. Memory, Mnemosyne, the mother of the muses, she's the source of historical record, of empirical fact.
But for Blake, that wasn't enough, was it?
Not nearly enough. Blake deeply distrusted empiricism. For him, memory only gives you fable, the flawed, dusty record of what happened. Real truth, vision, comes only through the imagination.
And Stephen wants that. He wants history to be just a fable he can discard. Joyce himself wrote about poetry being a revolt against actuality.
He desperately wants to believe it. But almost immediately, his own analytical mind, maybe that Aristotelian part of him, pulls him back to earth, he thinks, and yet it was in some way, if not his memory, fabled it.
He can't deny that things did happen.
Right. Real events occurred. Caesar really was stabbed. Pyrrhus really did lose all those soldiers. And those hard, actual facts are what have led him, Stephen, to this classroom, this job, this colonial bind. The past isn't just a story. It has consequences that enslave him now.
So he's caught between wanting Blake's imaginative freedom and being stuck with the undeniable weight of historical fact.
And this tension sparks an almost apocalyptic image in his mind. He hears or imagines the ruin of all space, shattered glass and toppling masonry, and time one livid final flame.
That sounds intense. What's going on there?
It's incredibly rich imagery. On one level, it echoes Blake's own visionary, often destructive prophecies. Blake's idea that the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Sometimes you need destruction to reach enlightenment.
But for Joyce, writing in Dublin, there's more to it.
Definitely. The sources strongly link this specific image, shattered glass and toppling masonry, to Irish revolutionary feeling. It connects back to the fall of Troy, the ultimate lost cause maybe, but more pointedly, it foreshadows Fenianism and the violence aimed at overthrowing British rule.
Like the Easter Rising.
Exactly. Stephen uses almost identical words later when thinking about Fenian revolutionaries and their desire for vengeance, for destruction that would bring rebirth. It's like Joyce is tapping into, or even predicting, the mindset that led to 1916, which did leave Dublin in ruins, but also ignited the final push for independence.
So history as submission, like Pyrrhus, versus history as violent revolutionary rupture, like the shattered glass Stephen's torn.
That's the core conflict right there, except the seemingly inevitable cycle of defeat taught by history, or embrace the potentially necessary violence of imagination to break the cycle. And this forces him into the really deep philosophical questions of the chapter.
He starts thinking about what might have been. What if Pyrrhus hadn't died the way he did? What if Caesar hadn't been assassinated?
He's wrestling with the sheer number of possibilities that didn't happen. This brings him right up against Aristotle's ideas of potentiality and actuality, dynamis and energia.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, Aristotle thought that for something to come into being, it moves from a state of being possible, dynamis, to being real, actual, energia. Stephen looks at history and sees all these infinite possibilities, Caesar living, Pyrrhus winning decisively, that were seemingly possible at one point.
But only one thing actually happened. Caesar was assassinated. That became the actuality.
And in becoming actual, it ousted all those other possibilities. They vanished. Which leads Stephen to this absolutely crucial, paralyzing question.
Can we even call them possibilities if they never happened?
Exactly. He asks, but can those have been possible seeing that they never were? Or was that only possible which came to pass?
Wow, if the answer is that only what actually happened was ever truly possible.
Then there's no real freedom, is there? History just becomes the inevitable unfolding of a predetermined script. Colonialism, oppression, failure, it was all locked in from the start.
That completely undermines any idea of changing things, of revolution, even of artistic creation having an impact.
It certainly does. It echoes Aristotle's physics again, the idea of the actuality of the possible is possible. The outcome that occurred was the only one the system could ever produce. Everyone, tyrant, victim, revolutionary, is just playing a part they couldn't refuse. That's the nightmare.
It's a truly crushing thought for someone like Stephen who wants to forge something new. Okay, let's shift back to his more immediate reaction. He tried that joke, the disappointed bridge. It failed with the students. Now he thinks about telling it to Haynes, the English visitor.
Right. He remembers Haynes, back in the first chapter, saying he wanted to collect Stephen's clever sayings for a little book, a chapbook.
So Stephen considers offering up this pure witticism, maybe hoping Haynes will actually appreciate it.
Yeah. He hopes maybe it could pierce the polished mail of his mind, get some real intellectual recognition from the Englishman.
But he immediately pulls himself up short, right,
Yeah.
with a really harsh self-judgment.
Devastatingly harsh. He sees exactly what that would mean. He'd be a jester at the court of his master, indulged and disesteemed. He'd win praise, maybe, but it would be the condescending praise given to a court fool.
And this isn't just about him. He connects it to a wider Irish experience.
Yes, the whole tradition of Anglo-Irish writers, like Oscar Wilde perhaps, who gained fame in England partly by playing the charming, witty Irishman for the amusement of the dominant culture. Their genius gets packaged as entertainment.
Becoming the clever pet of the establishment.
Precisely. And Stephen sees that potential role for himself with horror. Is that the price of acceptance? Turning his sharpest weapon, his wit, into mere compensation for being colonized and poor.
Giving his ideas away to Haynes's little chapbook would basically neutralize them, wouldn't it? They'd just become quaint Irish sayings, souvenirs.
Exactly. Intellectual prostitution, he feels. Giving away his artistic soul just to be tolerated, maybe even liked, by the very power structure he despises.
And he broadens this out. It's not just him, it's Ireland itself.
He sees Ireland reduced to a pawn shop. That's such a powerful image.
What does that mean, Ireland as a pawn shop?
It means everything valuable, the land, the power, even the ideas, is essentially owned by someone else, somewhere else, probably England. It's all in hock. Culture becomes secondhand, filtered through the master's taste. Nothing feels authentic or self-owned.
So giving his wit to Haynes would be like pawning another piece of himself, another piece of Ireland.
Yes, and he decides against it. We see later, especially in Proteus, how fiercely he rejects seeking approval, rejecting the bark of their applause. He knows he can't be the jester. The problem is he hasn't yet figured out how to survive without being the jester or compromising somehow.
All this frustration, the philosophical dead end of determinism, the social humiliation, the political impotence, it builds up to this final despairing thought in this section. Weaver of the wind. What's he saying about himself there?
It's a metaphor for utter futility. To weave the wind is to create something intricate, maybe beautiful, maybe intellectually complex, a theory, a poem, but it has no substance, no connection to reality. It catches nothing.
Like building a net out of air.
Exactly. It's constructing something elaborate on absolutely nothing. It's doomed to be ineffectual.
Where does the phrase itself come from?
It's traced back to the playwright John Webster from his play The Devil's Law Case. Webster used it to describe futile ambition, people trying to weave but nets to catch the wind.
And Stephen applies it to his own thinking, his struggles with Aristotle and Blake.
Yes. He feels like his complex mental gymnastics about history and possibility, or maybe just that elaborate, useless constructions, weaving the wind. He's terrified that his own art might end up being just as insubstantial, just as disconnected from changing anything real.
A fear that his intellectual effort is just negligible.
Precisely. He even links it to theology, thinking how the church took the mysterious sayings of Jesus and wove them into vast, complex doctrines on its looms.
So the question becomes, how do you weave something that isn't just wind? How do you build a system or an artwork that actually lasts, that has grounding?
And this connects right back to his thoughts in Telemachus. He decided there that the church fathers, the good theologians, built successfully because they founded the church on something paradoxical, the doctrine of consubstantiality.
The unity of Father and Son. He called it a productive void. How can a void be productive?
That's the paradox. It's built on mystery, on something non-rational, leap of faith. But because it acknowledges that void, that uncertainty, and builds from it, the structure endures. Those who just weave the wind, the skeptics, the jesters, they build on nothing solid, not even a productive void, so their constructions collapse.
So Stephen is searching for his own productive void. A foundation for his art that can acknowledge the nightmare of history but still create something meaningful, something that isn't just catching air.
That seems to be the struggle. He needs a basis for his aesthetic theory that isn't just empty speculation but can actually ground his artistic ambition in the face of political and philosophical despair.
It's fascinating how that phrase, weave the wind, resonated. You mentioned T.S. Eliot used a similar image in Gerontion.
Yes, vacant shuttles weave the wind. It suggests Joyce really tapped into a core anxiety for modernist artists, the fear that language itself, the very tool they use, might be inadequate, might just be weaving intricate patterns of nothingness.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground just in this part of the Nestor chapter. Stephen's mind travels so far, so fast.
From a seemingly simple history lesson about Pyrrhus
To these huge, wrenching questions about fate, free will, colonialism, art, philosophy, it really shows how, for Joyce, history isn't just dates. It's this living, breathing, often crushing force that shapes the present.
Especially in a place like Ireland, then. The past dictates the present in really unavoidable ways.
The central struggle seems clear. The individual artistic consciousness against this weight of historical determinism and political reality.
Right. Pyrrhus failed. Ireland seems like a pawn shop. Waking from the nightmare looks almost impossible if you accept that only what happened could have happened. But still Stephen reaches for Blake, for imagination, for something beyond the grim record.
This chapter really lays bare the conflict that will drive Stephen's development as an artist throughout the book. He's not just remembering facts, he's dissecting their philosophical core.
Which leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Okay, what should we leave people thinking about?
Well, if Stephen is leaning towards this deterministic view of history, that only what came to pass was ever truly possible, what does that actually imply? Does it mean that everyone in history, the oppressors, the victims, even the revolutionaries he might admire, were they all just puppets, just acting out roles in a script they couldn't change?
And if that's the case,
If political fatalism is the ultimate reality, then what room is genuinely left for the artist's vision, For that revolutionary imagination, Stephen seems to crave the one that conjures shattered glass and toppling masonry as a prelude to something new. How can you be a revolutionary, an agent of change, if deep down you suspect that nothing could ever have been different anyway? That's the real weight of the nightmare Stephen is trying, somehow, to weave his way out of.